Snow pressed softly against the tall windows of the Moscow restaurant, blurring the city lights into pale halos. Inside, everything gleamed: polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, waiters moving with rehearsed precision. This was one of those places where silence itself felt expensive. At the center table sat the guest everyone had been whispering about all evening. An Arab billionaire, recently arrived in Russia for high-level negotiations. He spoke calmly, his voice low and measured, addressing the restaurant manager in Arabic. His words were elegant, formal, carefully chosen. He was not angry. He was explaining. The manager nodded excessively, his smile tight and uncertain. He understood nothing. Around them, the staff exchanged uneasy glances. The hostess pretended to adjust a reservation list. A waiter slowed his steps, listening without comprehension. To Russian ears unfamiliar with Arabic, the language sounded fast and intense, and the billionaire's composed expression was misread as displeasure. The longer he spoke, the more uncomfortable the room became. The manager tried English. Broken phrases, apologies. The billionaire answered again in Arabic. Still polite, still restrained, but now with a trace of disappointment. He had expected better from a restaurant of this reputation. In Moscow, a global city, surely someone would understand him. No one did. Phones were discreetly checked. No signal in the thick-walled building. The on-call translator was unavailable. The staff felt the pressure rising like steam trapped under glass. A mistake with a guest like this could cost careers. To them, he was not just a man. He was money, influence, headlines. To him, however, the problem was simpler and heavier. He sat back in his chair, fingers resting on the table, eyes briefly lowering. The room was full, yet he felt isolated. He had traveled across continents, signed contracts in skyscrapers, commanded rooms filled with powerful men, but here, in the heart of Russia, he could not even explain a basic request. The loneliness of that realization stung more than any insult. The manager cleared his throat and offered another rehearsed smile. We try best, sir." The billionaire looked up again, expression unreadable. He began to speak once more in Arabic, slower now, as if clarity alone might bridge the gap. His words hung in the air, unanswered, unheard, and the silence that followed was heavier than the snow outside. From the far side of the dining hall, near the service station tucked behind a carved wooden divider, Anna stood frozen in place. She was supposed to be polishing glasses, but her hands had stopped moving. Every word the billionaire spoke reached her clearly, effortlessly, as if he were sitting beside her at a small kitchen table, instead of across a white-clothed table in one of Moscow's most expensive restaurants. She understood him perfectly. He's not complaining, she realized. He's asking for understanding. Her heart began to race. This was not part of her job. In Russia, hierarchy mattered, especially in places like this. A waitress did not interrupt a manager, let alone step into a situation involving a powerful foreign guest. She imagined the sharp reprimand, the cold look, the possibility of being fired on the spot. Still, she listened. The billionaire's Arabic was refined, classical, with the soft confidence of someone used to being heard. He was explaining a dietary restriction, mentioning a medical condition, apologizing for the inconvenience even as no one seemed to grasp his meaning. The manager nodded again, misunderstanding every sentence. Anna swallowed. Memories flickered through her mind. Hot afternoons in Amman, her grandmother correcting her pronunciation, insisting she repeat verses until every sound was perfect. Language is respect, her grandmother used to say. If you speak to someone in their tongue, you touch their dignity. The tension in the room thickened. The billionaire paused, disappointment now impossible to miss. The manager glanced around, desperate. Before Anna could overthink it, her feet moved. She stepped out from behind the divider, the soft click of her shoes sounding far too loud in the quiet hall. Several heads turned. The manager frowned slightly, confused by her approach. She stopped at a respectful distance from the table and inclined her head, as she had seen done so many times in the Middle East. Then quietly but clearly she spoke in flawless Arabic. "Sir, please forgive them. They do not understand what you are saying. If you allow me, I can help." The effect was immediate. The billionaire's posture changed as if an invisible weight had lifted from his shoulders. His eyes widened, not in suspicion but in astonishment. For a moment he simply stared at her, searching her face as though confirming that what he had heard was real. "In Moscow?" he asked in Arabic, a faint note of disbelief in his voice. You speak like this here. Anna felt every gaze in the room settle on her, but she did not look away. Yes, sir, she answered calmly. I understand you. Silence fell again, but this time it was different. Not heavy, expectant. For the first time that evening, the billionaire smiled. The manager blinked, clearly unsure whether to interrupt or step back. Anna turned slightly toward him and, in careful Russian, said, He has a medical restriction. He's asking if the dish can be prepared without one ingredient. Her tone was calm, professional, nothing like a nervous waitress overstepping her role. Relieved, the manager nodded quickly and retreated to give instructions to the kitchen. Only then did Anna turn fully back to the table. The billionaire studied her with open curiosity. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, marks of long years of responsibility. Your Arabic, he said in a low voice, still in his own language, is not learned from books. She smiled faintly. My grandmother lived in Jordan for most of her life. I grew up between Russia and the Middle East. She never allowed me to answer her in any other language. He let out a soft laugh, the sound of surprise turning into warmth. Around them, the Moscow restaurant slowly returned to its rhythm. Cutlery chimed. Quiet conversations resumed. Glasses were refilled. Yet at their table, time seemed to narrow. He asked her where she was from, and she answered honestly. A small provincial city, a modest family, a life far removed from billion-dollar deals. In Arabic, she told him how languages had become her refuge, how learning to speak as others spoke made the world feel less divided. And now you work here, he said, glancing around at the luxurious room. For now, she replied. In Russia, dreams often wait their turn. The food was corrected and returned. Anna translated each reassurance from the kitchen, each polite response from the billionaire, but the conversation had already moved beyond the meal. He asked what she studied. She told him about night classes, about translating documents for extra money, about how Moscow could be generous and cruel in the same breath. He listened without interrupting, his attention absolute. Powerful men were used to being heard, not to listening. Yet he listened as though her words mattered. You know, he said finally, stirring his tea, I came to Russia expecting coldness. Not the weather, people. His eyes met hers. Tonight I found warmth in the least expected place. Anna felt a quiet pride, not loud or triumphant, but steady. She had not just translated words. She had translated intent, dignity, and patience. When the manager returned, the billionaire spoke briefly in Arabic. Anna translated, everything was excellent. No complaints. Gratitude instead. As she stepped back, returning to her duties, she sensed that something subtle, but irreversible had shifted, like ice cracking on a river just before spring. The evening in the Moscow restaurant drew toward its quiet, polished conclusion. Outside, the snow had stopped falling, leaving the streets wrapped in a clean, reflective calm. Inside, the last courses were cleared with ceremonial care, and the low murmur of conversation softened into something almost intimate. Anna approached the table one final time with the check. Her movements composed, professional. She placed it down and stepped back, already preparing to return to the rhythm of her shift. For her, this was how moments usually ended, brief, intense, then gone. But the billionaire did not reach for his wallet immediately. He looked around the room once more, as if seeing it differently now. Then he spoke in Arabic, his voice thoughtful rather than formal. Anna translated for the manager. He thanked the staff for their patience and hospitality. The manager exhaled, relief written plainly across his face. When the manager left, the billionaire turned back to Anna. In Russia, he said, switching briefly to English, people often hide what they can do. She tilted her head slightly. Sometimes it's safer that way. He nodded as if he understood this far better than he let on. Then he slid the check aside and placed a card on the table instead. Simple, heavy, embossed with understated elegance. No title, just a name and a number. This is not a tip, he said gently, returning to Arabic. This is an invitation. Anna did not reach for the card right away. She had seen wealthy guests make dramatic gestures. Before, impulsive promises that vanished by morning. But his expression was different, calm, considered. You have something rare, he continued. Not just language. You know how to stand between worlds without belonging to only one. That is valuable, especially now. She felt a quiet tightening in her chest. Moscow had taught her to be cautious with hope. Still, she picked up the card, her fingers steady. I don't make promises easily, she said. Neither do I. He smiled. Good, then if you call, it will mean something. He stood, adjusted his coat, and for a moment the powerful businessman vanished, replaced by a traveler preparing to step back into the cold Russian night. At the door he paused and inclined his head, a gesture of respect, not status. As he left, Anna remained standing by the table, the card warm in her palm. The restaurant returned fully to normal. Orders called. Glasses clinked. The manager praised her professionalism in a hushed, almost reverent tone. Yet Anna barely heard him. Outside, Moscow waited, unchanged, immense, indifferent. But inside her, something had shifted. She tucked the card into her pocket and went back to work, knowing that tomorrow she would wake up in the same city, the same life, but with a door now quietly, undeniably open.